Hi, Gene here with today's thought. But before we get to today's thought, well, we're going back to the Middle East again because of everything that's happening over there. Israel is closing in on Hamas, but they're closing in on Hamas, and somebody from Hamas, one of the leaders, is talking about a ceasefire. Not only that, but Ismail Hania, the top leader of Hamas, talked about negotiating a two-state solution, believe it or not. So those two things tell you one thing before we get to the main thought, which is, as I've said in the past, that they are totally dedicated to the Quran exactly as it was understood in the 7th century, word for word, syllable for syllable. And make a long story short, if they're talking about ceasefires and even a two-state, a political discussion about a solution. Never mind that the Hamas charter calls for the total of destruction of Israel. No ifs, ands, or buts. But it means they're losing. And one of the reasons they're losing is, because number one, Israel is cleaning their clocks. They're going in. There was the whole point, or the big caveat that all the talking heads were talking about was that there'd be all these tunnels and booby traps, and Israel would be walking into ambushes, and especially terrorists would jump out, unexpectedly jump out of tunnels and attack the Israelis. And it's not happening. There were a couple of isolated instances where that happened. But the problem that the terrorists are having is that this is the 21st century, and the Israelis, they're very good on technology and artificial intelligence. So they've got drones flying around. They know, they can see these terrorists coming out of the tunnels, and they warn the Israelis, and the Israelis are ready for them. So that's one thing that's been happening. Another thing is now, Israel has been bombing the tunnels from above, but now that the Israelis are in Gaza, they find the tunnels themselves, and they chuck explosives down the tunnels and make them useless. Also, Netanyahu reiterated for the umpteenth time that he's not going to allow any fuel into Gaza. He said he would for the hospitals if Israel supervises the delivery of the fuel to make sure that the fuel goes only to the hospital, not to Hamas. But I just read this morning that he said again, no fuel at all into Gaza, because I guess there's no way for the Israelis to supervise the transportation of the fuel to make sure it doesn't go to Hamas. And Hamas has hundreds of thousands of liters of fuel. Some of it is there's a phone conversation that the Israelis taped and they put on the internet. I'm not going to play it now, but that shows two people talking, Palestinians talking and saying that there are hundreds of thousands. There's a lot of fuel under the Shifa hospital, So the fuel is there. But the main reason for not allowing the fuel in is because the Israelis are very, very smart. The Hamas, the terrorists, they need fuel to power the ventilators that ventilate their tunnels. If they can't ventilate the tunnels, they'll suffocate down there. So eventually, if Israel is successful in cutting off the fuel, and remember, they're destroying the tunnels as they're finding them and the entrances. So eventually, they're going to have to come out. Hamas is going to have to come out. I've seen an estimate of what they can hold out for 2 months down there. So they're going to be sitting there underground for 2 months, or they can pop up to surprise Israelis and get killed. So not a pretty choice for them. And but one of the Hamas knows, as I I think I said, if I didn't say it, I'll repeat it. But if they're talking about ceasefires and negotiations, it means they're losing. It means not that they're losing only, but they know that they're losing. And one of the reasons they're losing is because of a hope they had, or an expectation they had, when they invaded Israel on October 7th, was that once Hamas attacked, that other entities would join in. There have been some isolated missiles, for instance, fired from Yemen by the Houthis against Israel, and so far everyone has been intercepted. So but the main hope was Hezbollah, or two of their main hopes, one of them was that Hezbollah would enter the fray. Now, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, he just made a public speech. There was a big deal about this speech being made before it was made, whether he would call or announce that he was ordering Hezbollah to jump into the war. And he didn't do that. He expressed a lot of support for Hezbollah, but he did not say that Hezbollah was going to really ramp up they've been doing these little pinprick, an anti-tank missile here or there, little pinprick things, just as a token participation, but not they have something like 120 to 150,000 rockets, and they're not launching all those rockets into Israel, because Israel made very clear what they would do to Lebanon if Hezbollah was foolish enough to do that, which was make Lebanon, all of Lebanon, and definitely at least Beirut, look like Gaza City. So I predict that they're not going to enter the fray in any significant amount. But their other hope was that there would be a rebellion of Israeli Arabs, that Israeli Arabs would join the fight, that there would be a intifada. Intifada is a word for resistance or something in Arabic. So they were hoping for an Israeli Arab intifada. Well, not only did that not happen, but it's actually Hamas's attack, this massacre, is having the opposite effect. Now, one reason for that is because they mentioned the figure, Israelis, we all know the figure 1,400, about 13 or 1,400 Israelis just massacred, just murdered, most of them civilians. But what hasn't been as widely reported, 100 of those victims were Arab Israelis, because they didn't make any, Hamas didn't make any exceptions for Arabs that they came across. Apparently they think they're traitors, because one guy was a husband and wife, Arab husband and wife, in their car, and ambushed by Hamas, was these by terrorists, and he said, "I'm an Arab," and they said, "Well, you're more Jewish than the Jews," and they I don't know what happened to him, but they killed his wife. They shot his wife in the head. Right on the spot. So what you're seeing now, I'm going to show you now an article, quote from an article, and I linked to it so you can read the whole article. Very interesting, but it was in Newsweek, and it's by Mohammed Zoabi. Now, Mohammed Zoabi, well, he's listed here as a queer Israeli activist living in Tel Aviv, and now that brings up a couple other things we have to bring up, unpack. Number one, queer Israeli activist, but focus on the queer part. If he was a homosexual in Gaza, what do you think would happen to him? He'd be dead. He would be dead, and probably in the Palestinian Authority too, if they just found out that he was gay. But openly gay, and putting it in writing. And the other point I wanted to make was that all these accusations of Israeli apartheid, which means what happened in South Africa, where black people, black Africans were were confined to Bantustans, to separate communities. They couldn't live where white South Africans lived. But queer activists living in Tel Aviv. That's the main city. It's not the capital of Israel, but it's the main. I've been there. It's the main. It's the equivalent of New York. New York is not the capital of the United States, but it's the big main city. So he lives right in Tel Aviv. So how is it? That's obviously not apartheid. So now let's get to the article itself. Through our shared grief, a new Israeli nation is being born of all its citizens. The horror from the scenes and the horrifying stories have not only shocked all Israelis, but also marked a drastic shift in Arab-Israeli attitude toward the country, especially when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Historically, during Israeli-Palestinian escalations, the Arab community within Israel tended to be more sympathetic to Palestinians, mainly due to our exposure to Palestinian suffering. But on October 7th, it was that same exposure that made us feel more Israeli than ever when we saw not only the footage of our mass murder, remember 100 Arab Israelis killed, not only the footage of our mass murder, but the celebrations of it in Gaza that came through on social media. We saw clearly what would happen if the other side had the upper hand, and it triggered a deep sense of solidarity from the Arab community, bolstering a shared sense of being Israeli. According to a large poll carried out after the Hamas attack, over 80% of Arab Israelis rejected Hamas's attack, and almost 70% supported Israel's right to respond and defend its citizens. Only 5% of respondents voiced support for Hamas's actions. So that's one of the reasons that Hamas is in trouble. And it's instead of inspiring Arab Israelis to riot against the Israeli government and to burn shops and to basically to do what Black Lives Matter did all over the country in 2020. It's having the opposite effect. It's pulling Israelis and Arabs together, and which I applaud. And that's my thought for today. Thanks for stopping by. If you could subscribe, that would really be great. Share this video with anyone you think would benefit from it. But most of all, come back and see me again. Would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.